That's a statement of fact. It is always inclusive of all children. And more we believe our traditional public schools are a place where a lot of innovation is occurring and a lot of progress is occurring.
So let me say this. In the state budget for 2014-15, at the very last moment, a number of changes were added with respect to charter schools, particularly as they operate in the city. These changes, which were executed with little or no public input or transparency, weakened your mayoral control over decisions concerning how to use and allocate precious space in public school buildings, forbade the city from charging rent to charters, grandfathered in old co-locations, thus immunizing them from any changes, and essentially forced the city to approve all new co-locations or pay for space elsewhere out of pocket. To your credit, your office strongly opposed these changes, as did I, but they were nevertheless improved. So 2 years later, I'm wondering what has been the impact on the ground of these policies?
I'll start, and maybe Dean or Sharif want to add. Look, we did oppose that change. We have been able to work with the rules to maximize what we think is fair, to make sure that if there's a proposal that we think is not going to work or isn't appropriate, that we do have, in effect, due process rights around it. And we certainly want to work going forward to rationalize that, but I think the bottom line is that we continue with an overall reform agenda for our public schools. That's where the vast majority of our energy, of course, has to go. That is moving forward. We ask the support of the legislature in continuing that progress. And obviously, I believe, and I think you're right to say, there's different elements of the mayoral control equation, and sometimes there's a discussion that's not the literal question of mayoral control, but still can affect the level of control, like that decision you refer to. I'm a bit of a purist on this point. Mayoral control education is how we fix the school system. My predecessor and I didn't agree on a lot of things, but on that we fundamentally agreed. And it should not be diminished in any way, shape, or form. It should be reinforced so we can actually get to the work of doing these fundamental things, getting our kids to reading level, making sure high school graduation actually means college ready. That's what we're trying to focus on right now.
So I know that you oppose some of these changes, but how much control do you have over charter schools, particularly from a budgetary point of view?
Look, again, I'll start and would ask Dean and Sharif to fill in any blanks. There are obviously state rules governing what kind of allotment charter schools get, and we respect.
Are any of those rules undermining your control over your schools?
I think what I would say is the basic rules per se are not my central concern. The decision-making about our buildings and the ability to make just decisions about each application. We've approved plenty of applications from charters that we thought fit in a building appropriately. There's others we thought did not. That has to be the prerogative of the City of New York under a mayoral control system. That should not be compromised. Additional funding requirements, like I mentioned in the current budget proposal by the governor, that would add to the obligations of the City of New York and no other locality in the state, clearly are not fair from our point of view. So the point from my point of view is not to add additional onerous costs or regulations onto the city that would undermine our ability to make the right decisions for our schools. Do you have anything to add?
No, that's perfect. Okay. That's the major point.
My concern is, so I guess I'm trying to understand that, like, for instance, who pays the rent on these charter schools? You or Eva Moskowitz or whoever are the operators? How does?
Under the agreement of 2 years ago, we pay. There's a co-location process. If the co-location process fails, and the charter is able to find alternative space, then we pay the rent up to, I believe it's $40 million, at which point it is a shared expense with the state. And so far we're about $20 million. So far we've committed about $20 million.
So how is that $20 million commitment being used? Explicitly.
We are paying at this point about $20 million
Towards,
those charters.
towards,
Yeah, we reimburse them for the rent, and it's approximately $20 million.
so we pay the rent.
Yes.
So
Under the agreement from 2 years ago, again, that was not our choice, but that's what the state
it's not your
determined.
choice?
Yes.
So it sounds more like it's not your choice. What would you prefer?
We would go back to the system before that.
So what?
We would go to the structure before that.
Would you explain that again so we can see for the record what the difference is between what you prefer and what's being imposed on you?
Prior to that, the city had the opportunity to make completely its own decision. This created a process which had, as the mayor pointed out, due process stage in it, where we could negotiate with the charters, and then there were, if that didn't work, there were other options that could be used.
So you're happy about this arrangement? You think we should, as a legislature, reinforce this arrangement, provide more opportunity?
Again, we think the previous arrangement, the arrangement before 2 years ago was better. I believe in mayoral control.
For the sake of the record, when you say it was better, better means what?
Okay, I'll start and Dean will fill in the blank.
Specifically.
Let me just put this in the larger rubric. I think any mayor, I would imagine any county executive in this state, believe that we have to have the freedom to make local decisions effectively and use our resources effectively. We are always concerned about mandates that tie our hands. The structure 2 years ago and before gave us the freedom to make these decisions more effectively. The current structure has added additional limitations, although, again, as you heard, we've broadly been able to find ways to work with it. We don't think it's the right way to go. We think things before were better. Dean can define that.
Right, but I will just add, Senator, what the mayor identified in his original testimony was the piece that we are focused on in the current budget was the additional obligation that was only falling on New York City on charter school tuitions, and that's about $30 million in the current budget. And that's the piece we actually focused on in the testimony.
Right,
So
that's
And that
the
is
new
only,
problem.
and that is only in New York City.
Right, that is a new problem that we're very concerned about. That's in this budget now.
And how does the governor respond to this new problem that that's being imposed on
How has?
the governor?
He proposed it.
Right. So he's not cooperating with you? Is that what you're saying?
I'm not going to characterize it.
I don't want
It's a
forgive my
proposal we
language.
don't
I didn't
agree
mean to
with.
put it that way, but
No, it's a
you
proposal we don't agree with.
You don't agree with it?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
I said that in my testimony.
Well, I just want to reiterate, because I might not have heard it. And was it like written?
Yes, it's in the budget
Can you
proposal.
send my office a copy of your
Yeah,
concerns in that
absolutely.
regard? Again, I have you, as the mayor and super chancellor, so to speak, had an opportunity to determine, as per this experiment called charter schools,
Say again.
as per this experiment that we've come to know as charter schools, which were designed, intended, and proposed at the time to be not a second Department of Education, but laboratories, so to speak, that would provide the opportunity for us to learn how to teach our children better, and those lessons would be replicated throughout the district. Has any of that part of the proposal that was originally brought forward been actually fulfilled in terms of what the private school movement teach you as a mayor or other mayors how to better?
I think it's a decidedly mixed bag. I think it's a very fair and important question. Yes, the charter school movement started with the promise of innovation and sharing of best practices and creating good
Sharing with who, by the way?
with the traditional public schools.
Okay, just so we know.
No, very fair point. And so I think the fact is that the history has proven to be a real mixed bag. One of the things Chancellor Farini has done, and I agree with her entirely, is she's reached out to a number of charter schools that want to have a close working relationship with our traditional public schools, that want to share best practices both ways. Because, by the way, we believe in a lot of our traditional public schools, real innovation is happening that can help charters and vice versa. I would say there is a mixed bag in the charter movement. Some schools doing great and important work that is yielding innovations that the traditional public schools can use and are being shared very openly and productively with the traditional public schools, often on a district basis. Others where that's not happening, where the innovation either is not occurring or it's not being shared or the student body is not representative, et cetera.
Let me
So
interrupt for a
it is
second,
a
'cause I
subtle
don't wanna
reality.
forget what's on my mind.
Senator Perkins, I'm sorry, you're at 0, so we just have to let the mayor close up and go on
Okay,
to
so let
the
me just, if
next.
you don't mind, Madam Chair, Senator Kruger, let me finish what I'm saying, because I did wait a while to be here, so I think.
No, I know.
I don't think, am I being irrelevant or out of order?
Just close your sentence, okay?
Okay, but I just don't want to be rushed through what I've waited so long to share, because it's important. The heart of the movement is in my district, as you know.
Yes.
So I'm not going to just be here to, deal with this. It's a big thing for me. It's the biggest thing that one could imagine when you have a district where public schools are not doing well, and then you bring in another whole entity that is not transparent and accountable. So I'm just trying to understand, have you done a report, or has anybody done a report on the successes of the charter schools that have been made available to you or any other city entity that could be replicated in our public schools so that our children could get the benefit of those particular lessons at all?
I think you're raising another important point, and I certainly understand.
Could you say that again, please?
I'm sorry. I think you're raising a very important point, and I think knowing your district well, your district has gone through a particularly tough experience during this last decade or so. There is not, to the best of my knowledge, a coherent, consistent approach, certainly not one that we inherited, for looking at what the innovations were coming out of the charters and figuring out how they can work with the traditional public schools. Honestly, I believe in the previous administration that was not the worldview. It was not that the traditional public schools are going to be the great core of our school system and where we're really going to make a difference for our children. And the charters were providing obviously important options for some kids, but also they're supposed to be that laboratory, that innovative force that you talk about. I certainly don't know of any effort to bring that concept together and figure out how it could systematically help the traditional public schools. So what we're trying to do now, in effect, through the Equity and Excellence Plan, is find the charters that do want to be those district partners with traditional public schools and cross-fertilize productively. As I said, some are very willing to do that and are good partners in that. Some are more resistant or have a different approach. But where we can work together, we will. But has it been made systematic ever? I would say, from my experience, no.
Mr. Mayor, can we ask you if you have a staff person who can follow up with Senator Perkins?
Absolutely. I'll follow up personally. Given our longstanding history, we will set a time to follow up directly.
I appreciate you doing that.
Thank you, Senator Perkins.
As detailed as possible. But this is a very, very big issue for us in my district, and I understand, Senator Kruger, how you may feel, and I respect your chairmanship, but I have a right to ask these questions about my
Senator
district,
Perkins,
and other people have had more time than I have.
No, everybody's stuck with the 10-minute clock.
Then
We were careful
I'd ask
about
one
that.
final question.
But we will follow up.
We'll follow up afterwards.
Senator
Thank you.
Persaud is the next speaker, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for being here. I just want to first commend your staff for the open lines of communication during the storm that we had.
Thank you,
And but looking forward, what are your plans for, because it seems as though with the climate change and the more frequent occurrences of these natural disasters are occurring, and especially in my community where it's, the water is just coming in every time you look around. What are your plans for upgrading the equipment, and what plans do you have, long-term plans do you have in place?
Well, Senator, I know your district, obviously, and your district has been vulnerable in light of climate change. So I'd say when it comes to snow on the one hand versus flooding issues or hurricane issues, I think we have two different realities. On snow, I feel the city's response, of course, was very strong. We're going to learn each time. We're going to make adjustments each time. I think we learned a lot even from the last few blizzards. We certainly learned a lot from the 2010 storm, where I think the city did not have its assets properly in position. I think the MTA, again, I agree with and appreciate the way they handle things, getting the buses in at the right time, et cetera. So in terms of snow response, we're learning a lot, and I think we have a very strong capacity to address these kind of blizzards. In terms of hurricanes and coastal issues, the resiliency work is increasing all the time. It's been a very good working relationship with the Army Corps of Engineers, obviously our Parks Department and others. That's, of course, going to happen year by year. A lot of federal money coming in, a lot of city and state efforts as well. That will be ongoing work, meaning in the age of climate change, resiliency work will essentially never end. We will keep at it all the time, improving resiliency. And we want to figure out, obviously working with you, what other things we can do. I think there's some real DEP issues in your neighborhood that we can work on together. So I would look forward to figuring out a plan with you and our DEP Commissioner, Emily Lloyd.
Okay. But you also need to work with sanitation to upgrade the equipment that they have. We really need to upgrade some of the equipment.
Just for clarity, what do you mean specifically?
The snow movers, yeah, they're kind of ancient, they've passed their prime.
Well, we're going to keep investing in them, I assure you.
They did a better job being prepared this time. Another thing, the state has decided to not add additional funding for summer youth because, we're looking at the minimum wage increase, so the funding is just flat. What is the city doing? Because you look at most of the kids who are applying for summer youth are not receiving jobs. And we have a situation in the city, especially in the lower income areas, where there's a spike in violence. And you can correlate the spike in violence with the kids having nothing to do. What is the city doing to help DYCD, some of the other agencies, to fund summer youth?
We had an increase in our local funding this last summer, so we had a substantial increase in the number of summer jobs. We just sat down with the council members when I announced my preliminary budget. We're going to look to the executive budget in May for further determinations on summer jobs. Clearly, there's immense interest in the council and building on the number we had last year. So I'm not going to make a formal announcement, but I can simply say we're very focused on it. The council is very focused on it. Everyone's interested in raising that bar if we can find a way to do it. We're going to, obviously, as I want to come back to where I started the testimony, we're going to be watching the overall economic indicators very closely in the next few months because there's a lot of warning signs that will cause us to have to be very smart about how we spend money. But it is certainly our goal to go farther when it comes to summer jobs.
Thank you. I just want to make sure that we understand it. We have to be smart in the way we're spending money, but spending money on our youth is really important. That's the smartest thing that we can
with
really
your
do.
help, you're talking to the guy who focused on pre-K and after school for middle school kids, so I'm there.
My last question is around the rise in crime. What plans do you have in place for this upcoming summer?
Wait, say that again, I'm sorry?
The increase in violence, especially in the increase in gun violence.
Well, I'd like to reframe that in my view. We have always take very seriously violence in any community, and we know there is a scourge of gun availability and gun violence. But I want to emphasize, these numbers I'm about to indicate represent human lives. When I say overall serious crime is down 5.8% over 2 years, shootings were down from 2014 to 2015. Gun arrests went up 10%. This is all indicative of a city that's getting safer, even though there are serious challenges still to be addressed. In the course of this year, 2,000 more officers will be on patrol between the 1,300 new that we are bringing on the force and the 700 or so that are being civilianized from desk jobs to patrol. All of these pieces are going to increase our ability to get at the root of the problem, which, as Commissioner Bratton and Chief O'Neill always say, is several thousand particularly violent felons that are still out there, many associated with gangs and crews. The focus more and more is on the real violence doers, that core set of violent criminals, and we're doing better at getting at them, getting the evidence, building cases about them, getting the arrest, getting the guns off the street. That's going to intensify, but I think the simplest way I could say it is 2,000 more cops on the street is going to make a huge difference.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Kennedy.
Thank you, Mayor, very much for being here. Thank you for your leadership and for
you.
your patience. I know it's been a long testimony.
Patience is a virtue, Senator.
It certainly is. Over 4 hours, and I appreciate all of your comments. I just had a couple of different thoughts, going way back several hours in the testimony. There were a couple of my colleagues from upstate that touched upon a couple of initiatives I want to ask you about. The first has to do with the property tax cap for New York City. There's been a lot of positioning, a lot of rhetoric, a lot of conjecture up here and legislation proposed and whatnot. just want to hear again, your comments on the property tax cap for the city of New York, and furthermore, if you believe, because I have a feeling I know what your answer may be, if you feel that a study to get to the root of this thing to back up our position.
The last part of the question, I'm sorry, if I believe.
Are you open to some sort of a study to that effect on a property tax cap for New York City, if in fact that is necessary?
I don't agree with it philosophically and practically as well. I always want to.
What is that?
I always want to learn more, but I want to explain the why in this.
On the property tax cap itself, I'm sorry.
Yes, I just don't believe that it's a productive tool in terms of what we're dealing with. So again, when you combine the particular challenges that the city faces, which I don't think I have to document. New York City has a whole host of very, very intense challenges that have developed over decades. That had a lot to do with the quality of life in our city, the safety of our city, fairness and decency in our city. These challenges didn't occur overnight, but they're ours, whether it is the affordability crisis, the homelessness crisis, the safety challenges, which I'm thrilled at how well NYPD has done on, but there's more to come. Obviously, the threat of global terror that is aimed at New York City in a way that's true of only a few places in the United States of America. We have a particular set of challenges. We also know that in a downturn scenario, we're vulnerable in a way that's overwhelming because, again, we know that federal and state partners will be compromised in such a scenario, and we know that our fixed costs don't change. If we're going to keep our streets safe, if we're going to deal with the tremendous amount of human need, we have to keep doing that downturn or no downturn. So from my point of view, anything that limits our capacity arbitrarily could undermine the fundamentals of our city, but also undermine our ability to do the thing which I think we're doing well now. And I want to give my predecessors credit, and I want to give the people in New York City credit. The fact that we're economically stronger after some decades where we were really in decline, we are strong. We have to maintain that for the good of our people, for the good of the people of the whole state. We have to keep that going. So I don't want anything that inhibits our ability to do that. I am sensitive to the fact I am a homeowner in Brooklyn. I understand people going through some real challenges in terms of the cost of living, and that property taxes are a part of it. We're certainly going to always look at ways that we can address the challenges of our homeowners, but a cap, I think, is a problematic approach. As I mentioned to Senator Lanza, I know he's offering it in very good faith, but even the circuit breaker or the override capacity is one that I think would be an imperfect tool given the reluctance that elected officials have, obviously, when it comes to taxation. So I think we're going to certainly engage in fiscal discipline. We're going to engage in ways of helping our homeowners, but that would not be the one I'd choose.
Do you feel strong enough in that, Mayor, to put a study forward to back up that plan that you have put in place?
Again, I'm being careful in my answer because I think that is a very much an eye of the beholder question. I'm always happy to have this conversation with you, but there's no scenario that I can envision where we would want to tie our hands in terms of our ability to maintain the standard of living of the people of New York City and the safety of the people of New York City. If we had a different world, which maybe was true 40 years ago, let's say, 50 years ago, where there was a federal government ready, willing, and able to come in the event of crisis. And that was very true in that time frame, not true today. Maybe I'd have a different worldview, but I have no illusion of that fundamental reality changing anytime soon. So I have to very carefully protect the interests of my city, and that's why I can't see any scenario where I would agree with that.
Understood. What about if you compare a property tax cap, so if that's off the table, the potential, I know it's been offered, and there's been talk about this, the potential for a Medicaid cap. Your thoughts on that as well?
I think we've got two dynamics happening simultaneously that have to be addressed. Again, I've spoken to the governor's proposal, and I've affirmed I appreciate the governor's clarification that it won't cost the city a penny. But we understand there are real challenges in the Medicaid system in general. As I said, I appreciate that the governor, when he first came into office, focused on some of the fundamental reforms needed. And then we have, so there's that ongoing issue, but then we have a whole different but related issue of our Health and Hospitals Corporation, which will need substantial reform. So we'll absolutely engage the governor in ways that we can look at reforms and efficiencies vis-a-vis Medicaid in general in the city, but specifically we have to engage in a process very quickly of coming up with a reform plan for our health and hospitals, our public health and hospitals. That has to happen under any event. The two, to some extent, interrelate. But what I can tell you is, having just gone through the process with our housing authority, and remembering our housing authority houses over 400,000 people, and there was not a reform plan previously to deal with its financial reality. We put that in place. We'll take the situation with Medicaid, the situation with our Health and Hospitals Corporation head on. It's our obligation to do so. We'll present a plan. Certainly, I'm sure it'll be part of the conversation here, as with our city council. But we're dealing with a series of changes that really represent a lot of history, unfortunately, coming home and you know, having a very big impact now. $17 billion in the case of the Housing Authority that should have been spent over many years. It wasn't. We have to deal with that problem now. Medicaid issues that have only been exacerbated by changes in state and federal policy, no matter how well-intentioned. That's what's happening. And it's happening in public health systems all over the country. So we've got to make a series of big changes. They'll be tough, but it's our obligation to do them.
Thanks, Mayor. One other item, and I suppose that this has, look, every initiative that comes out of New York City, as you know, has a major impact, not just on the state, but this country. And one of the issues that I think has had an impact on all of us for generations, and you talked about, you know, where the city has come from over the course of the last several decades. And the city's a much different place than it was back in 03 when the bonds were refinanced, but I want to go back to 1975 before I was born. And we're going to be paying these bonds off well into 2030 to 34. As it stands today, and as you had mentioned earlier, we're going back hours in your testimony, so forgive me for having
ancient history.
Forgive me for having waited so long to get back to this, but I think it's important to talk about that refinancing. That, you know, it was the state back in 03 that picked up the refinancing during a new crisis, again, before your administration. And these bonds, these Star C bonds were refinanced, saving about $600 million. But as far as I'm concerned, again, as an outsider from the city of New York, as an upstater, these are funds that the state, including us upstate, helped to pay for. And, you know, with a lot of these cash-strapped cities, including my own and other upstate cities, when it comes to AIM funds, and I know we discussed that before, and I heard your testimony about AIM funding, don't you feel that it would be more appropriate to take that funding and reinvest it into other cash-strapped cities and municipalities like the ones in upstate that are really in dire need right now?
Again, Senator, I know this is, we're all providing, I hope, a positive lesson here in a responsible, positive public dialogue between people who happen to come from different regions, different parties. You know, this is actually what I think the people would like to see more and more all over the country. You're raising a perfectly fair question. What is fairness in this equation? I, again, have spent a lot of time, I've been very blessed to spend a lot of time in Western New York working in public service. Profound needs, profound hope, I believe, profound great attributes to Western New York, and profound needs. When we hear about initiatives to help upstate, I applaud them. I applaud them because we're all in this together. So the question then becomes, what's fair in each and every one of the decisions we look at? My point of view is, first of all, when you talk about the AIM money, so $300 million plus at the time, it was cut, as Dean reminds me, $500 million not long before that. We can do the math any way we want. If we take the $300 million and say it was cut 5 years ago, that's $1.5 billion that would have come to New York City. That's gone. If you take the $500 million figure, obviously it goes to $2 billion or more. How about the money that was agreed to by the Court of Appeals, highest court in the land, a decade ago, that would have led to many billions more for my public schools that clearly are not where they need to be? And no one's, I know you feel the same about your public schools. No one's, I don't want to in a bad way compare scars. We're all trying to fix problems that were handed to us by history. We're all trying to serve our people. But if I've got 30% of my kids reading at third grade level, I can't say to you that I don't need the resources to fix that problem fundamentally. By my account, by the highest court in this state, we should have had many billions more to deal with that problem. So we've lost a lot in these transactions. On this one, we believe fundamentally it is an ironclad understanding. It was affirmed by the Court of Appeals on the MAC bond issue. Once something is written in stone like that, and we are depending on it, we need it, and then that helps us make up for the sudden $600 million our actuary just put on our current budget out of nowhere, which will go on every year in the future. The problem of health and hospitals, which again, no matter how well-intentioned, did stem from, in part, state and federal policy changes. I could go on and on with all the unanticipated problems or the infrastructure challenges, et cetera. It doesn't make any sense for me to say agreed upon dollars we're just going to give away when we have this level of need.